land. I can do whatever I want. And he was a person paid by the British government to make sure the Sikhs break away from the Gurdwara. Because that's what the British were trying to do. You guys understand this? Right? Following along so far? Not too boring? Yeah? Yeah? You're right? I'll tell it'll get exciting in a second. When the British paid Mahant Narayana Das, he started doing things that was so okay. Some Udasis were doing like, some Mahants were doing like, normal stuff like chalo, they'll just stop caring about the panth, langar vi lona hat gaye. But Mahant Narayana Das started doing some crazy things. First thing he did is he called a bunch of dancers in Maharaj's Darbar and he had like 9 girls dance for him. It's like, whoa, in the Gurdwara Sahib, right? Then he had a rule in his Gurdwara Sahib, in Nankana Sahib, that nobody can come to the Gurdwara with kakar. Can you imagine going to the Gurdwara and like, Karpan, you're not allowed? Kada? No kadi allowed here. But this thought, no. You have to take that off if you want to come inside. It's like, wait, I thought this was the birthplace of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. What in the world's going on here? So he made these rules. Whereas there was a Gursikh that went to go and do a shnan in the Sarovar, and they took away his kakars. Imagine you go to the Gurdwara Sahib and you come home and you're like, mom's like, where's your karban? Oh, the Gurdwara guy stole it from me. It's like, what? What were you doing? I thought they were supposed to give you your kakar. I thought they were supposed to inspire you. And then there's even stories where there was a group of girls that went there, young girls, and they were raped. So stuff like this, imagine you're hearing this from a distance and you're at home as a Sikh and you're getting triggered. You're like, oh, what are they doing at that place? And this wasn't only happening in one place, it was all over the place. So during the 1920s, there was a movement that happened. So say this word with me. It was called the Gurdwara Reform Movement. What was it called? Have you heard that word before? Yeah, roughly? Okay. Have you ever heard the word Singh Sabha? Yeah? So this is all happening at the same time. Singh Sabha Lair, Gurdwara Reform Movement. It's also called the Akali Movement. All this is happening at the same time. Like, you know how nowadays, after 1984, after 1986, the whole Panth got together and they said, okay, we're going to do a Khalistan movement. We're going to do this movement. But prior to that, there was different movements. And this was one of them, the biggest one. Why? Because the Sikhs were sitting there and were like, we can't even control our Gurdwara. The systems of the Gurdwara are so out of control that we need a system where Sikhs can actually go to the Gurdwara and feel like, sada karya. Like, we don't know what's about to go down here. Okay. So that movement started happening. It's called the Gurdwara Reform Movement. In this, there's different groups of Gursikhs. There's a Gursikh by the name of Kartar Singh, some Lashman Singh, Horvi Sige. There's a whole bunch of these groups of Sikhs, like Jathe of like 200 people, 300 people, 500 people, some groups of like 2,000. And so imagine you're in one of these, let's just call it a WhatsApp group. Yeah, modern. They didn't have WhatsApp then. They actually talked to each other. Can you believe that? Right? They would actually say fateh to each other rather than wajikafa, wajikafa. You know what I'm talking about? Wajikafa, wajikafa. Paji, are you coming today? Wajikafa, wajikafa. It's like, we don't. So they would get in groups of 1,000 people and go to Gurdwara Sahibs. And they would protest outside to say, how dare you not let us in the Gurdwara Sahib? Ek Guru Nanak Dev Ji da asthan hai, and so we need the keys back. So some of these Mahants, in secrecy, they started giving the keys back. They're like, theek hai, we don't want this pressure, we'll give it back to you. We'll give you the Gurdwara Sahibs back, it's all yours. So they started taking over some of the Gurdwara back from the British. Because the British wanted to really control them. Okay. But Nankana Sahib, Jada Mahant Sigana, this guy was long lost. This guy was like, Jaan bujh ke tang karna. To the point where he had government guards paid for him by the British. And there was a person who was the Deputy Commissioner of Lahore at the time. His name was Mr. King. Okay, he was a Gora Siga. So his name was Mr. King. He wasn't a king, his name was Mr. King, right? And so he's the deputy commissioner. He would be in contact with Narayanu Das, giving him whatever funding that he needs. And so Narayanu Das, he had a salary of over 100,000 rupees of that time. Both, that's a lot of money. To put it in context, just 40 years prior to that, Maharaja Ranjit Singh's Darbar, how much do you think 1 rupee of India was in British pounds? Like today, you think about it, 1 Canadian dollar, when you go to Punjab, how many rupees does that turn into? 60, 70-ish? Okay. So would you say the currency of Canada dollar is bigger? Yeah? Because you go here, and all your cousins in India be like, yaar, tu iPhone le aaya? Sanu bhi la de, like you got tusi to bahut paise thode kol hege hai na. And then you like explain to them how a mortgage works. And then they're like, what mortgage? Because they've never had mortgages. They just have like, my great grandpa gave us this pind da ghar, we have it. Right? And they're like, what, you have to pay thousands of dollars a month to live? Right? So it's a concept, the culture is very different. Us time te bhi vakhra siga, but it was the opposite. It was the exact opposite. 1 India rupee was 25 plus pounds in Britain, in England. So you would go to India, you would get 100 rupees and be like, wow, I'm rich. And then you go to England and that 100 rupees times 25 now turns into 2.5 thousand. And you're like, wow, I can buy whatever I want. That's a lot of money. So a lot of people, even from America, they were leaving America, leaving England, leaving Portugal, France, generals, ਵੱਡੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਜਰਨੈਲ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਰੁਪਈਏ ਕਮਾਉਣੇ ਆ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਅੱਜ today what are we doing? What has happened in the last 60 years? I know you guys are young, you guys sometimes don't get to think about this because you're just like born playing your video games, Call of Duty, right? And then your mom's like, ਪੜ੍ਹਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ, homework ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ, and you're like, oh my God, mom, close the door. And so we're in this little bubble, but we're not realizing, wait, how did we get here? What was our grandparents doing? Oh, why did mom leave the pen to come here? For economic opportunity. What was it for? Economic opportunity. They wanted money. Because in what was happening during your grandpa's generation? Brothers were fighting for Jameen. Because the British cut Punjab in half. The Jameen was limited. People were too many. And so the families had to resort to whatever they had. So they said, you know what? 8 brothers, yeah. My grandpa, he was 4 brothers, 4 sisters. 8. And they fought over their own land. Imagine like we had this Gurdwara property and there's 8 of us and we had to cut it in half. You're like, because there's no other way to survive. And when half of them were like, you know what, we can't live like this. We need to go to Dubai. We need to go outside of Punjab. And eventually they started making their way to Kenya. They made their way to England, Afghanistan, and eventually to Canada. So now here they are. They're like, all right, so we spent, and you've heard this before. You've heard that before? Yeah? Very relatable. It's like, ਪੁੱਤ ਹੁਣ ਤੂੰ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਲਿਖ ਜਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੇਰੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਮਿਹਨਤਾਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਦਿਹਾੜੀਆਂ ਲਾਈਆਂ ਇਹੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ So then they're like, and you're like, oh my God, that's so much pressure. I don't want to be a doctor.